Yeah, I think they did, and they found a really good partner and a team that wasn't, oh, we just want them for right now kind of thing. The Rangers are sort of, maybe they're hanging around, but they're really looking towards next year, and that team with the deep farm system, and the Phillies needed quantity and quality, I think, in terms of replenishing their system, and I think that's exactly what they got in that deal.
Yeah, now, is there, in your opinion, a key to this deal? Was there a guy in this deal that made this thing make sense? Because a lot of people said, well, they didn't get the number 1 or number 2 prospect in the Rangers system, but they did get 5 plus Harrison. Is there a guy that makes this thing work for you?
I don't think there is one guy. I think that sometimes people can get a little short-sighted and be like, well, if we're going to trade Hamels, we need the number 1 or 2 prospect. And, sure, it would have been great to get Joey Gallo or Nomar Mazara, the Rangers' top 2 prospects. But, they got 3 guys, all of whom are in our top 100 prospects list. Jake Thompson is going to be a very good starting pitcher in the big leagues, number 3 starter, maybe even a number 2. Nick Williams has as much bat speed as anybody, took a big step forward in terms of his offensive production. And Jorge Alfaro, is an unfinished product behind the plate, but he's got as much arm strength as anybody, any catcher at any level, period, and has a ton of power at the plate. So they've got 3 really, really good players, all with upside. And that's not even counting the guys they got that are, quote unquote, a little lower down. All of whom I think have a chance to be big league players. So, sometimes you can get lost in that, I want the big shiny object at the top of the list. But to get those 3 guys, along with other very usable parts, I think was a good overall haul.
Overall, they get 5 prospects. Does this add enough depth to the Phillies organization to make the fans feel like this could be that the process maybe got expedited a little bit for them?
So you're asking me if Phillies fans will ever be satisfied? Is that what that boils down to?
I know the answer to that one.
Sorry. I think that it goes a long way to helping, for any team that, was in the situation that the Phillies were in, where you had an aging big league roster that they probably held on to for too long. So they didn't get the return that they could have for, say, Jimmy Rollins when they finally did turn around and trade him. So this was a case where they traded a guy in Hamels when he still had peak value. And listen, the system hadn't been as good, but Maikel Franco made it to the big leagues. Aaron Nola in the big leagues. Ironically, that was Marty Wolver's last first-round pick, and he's in the big leagues. J.P. Crawford is, arguably the best shortstop prospect in baseball now. Maybe right after Corey Seager, but there's no doubt Crawford will play shortstop. So it's not like they haven't produced players. And there was some more talent there that was starting to come. Roman Quinn to me was really interesting. And then they had Cornelius Randolph in the draft. They're top 10 or so. It's a pretty good list now. Yeah, I think they've gone a long way. And that's why I said they needed quantity and quality. So just getting a number 1 guy, that's great. It makes for a good headline. But in terms of what you're trying to do in terms of rebuilding an organization, you need more than just one guy, because not only do you need to bring a bunch of guys up to the big leagues to bring energy and talent, but you also need trading chips so that if they can turn things around in the next year or so, they have depth that they can trade from and not completely destroy the farm system as a result.
These guys, most of them play Double-A ball right now. I believe Eichhoff threw in Triple-A the other day. He may even possibly be a September call-up candidate. Which of these guys do you think is prepared to help this team the fastest?
Probably Thompson, I think, just in terms of what he profiles as. Nick Williams. Also, he was in Double-A and had a really good year, but I could see him maybe needing a little more time to refine a couple things. His approach has gotten increasingly better. There was a lot of swing and miss initially, and he's picked that up or improved that. But Thompson is a guy I could see helping them next year. Alfaro's missed too much time. I could see a guy like Eichhoff helping them like this year or next year. But I think that Thompson has a chance to have a large roster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and obviously the Phillies, they got back a lot of pitching between this deal, the Revere deal, and the Papelbon deal. In the Ben Revere deal and the Papelbon deal, any of those three guys excite you, or is it just you hope that one of those guys helps you out?
I think anytime that you can add guys with arm strength, you have a chance, right? So, we put Alberto Tirado in at number 15 on the Phillies list. So that tells you something. He's still young. He's 20, but he can crank it up to 97, 98 miles per hour. He's shown some promise with the secondary stuff. It's just inconsistent. So, I think worst case he ends up in the bullpen, but he could be a really valuable bullpen guy. Things could click for him, and he could end up, sticking as a starter. I guess if the Phillies want to put him back and try him as a starter. He moved into the bullpen this year and has been missing a lot of bats. Command has been an issue for him. So, but I think he's one of those guys that could end up being a setup man. Maybe he closes eventually. I don't know. That remains to be seen. But of those guys, I think that's the guy, just because of the arm strength, that you want to keep an eye on.
The guys that got back, Jonathan Mayo joining us, MLB.com, looking at the prospects the Phillies got back for Cole Hamels. Did those guys automatically jump over a lot of guys in the organization? Are they now, those five guys, the Phillies, other than J.P. Crawford, are they really like the top 5 or 6 guys in their organization all of a sudden?
Yeah, well, Nola still ranks until he gets past, rookie eligibility. So he's still on there. So technically, we have Crawford 1 and Nola 2, and then it goes Thompson, Williams, Alfaro in that order, with Cornelius Randolph at 6. So yeah, they slide in there right at the top. That one's based on where they are in the top 100 overall. That wasn't even we didn't have to really try to compare and contrast the systems and things like that. Like when we try to put a guy like Tirado or Eichhoff on a list, you need to kind of look to see where they were on the old list and the strengths of that system and where the guy has come. So yeah, they added 3 of their top 5 prospects just from the Hamels trade alone.
Yeah, Thompson now 3, Nick Williams 4, and Alfaro 5. That's over at MLB.com, the prospect watch for the Phillies. And all of a sudden, this went from a team that didn't have a lot of hope. Does this trade now give this team, a bright future? Is this a team now that you would, there's a lot of young teams I see, Jonathan, that, I don't know, the Astros were a team that lost 92 games last year. All of a sudden, the Royals have been down rotten, and now their young players all just kind of came at the same time. Is this a team that 2 years from now that could have a similar situation?
I think so. If you look at that top 5, you've got J.P. Crawford, who's in Double-A. You've got Aaron Nola in the big leagues. Thompson and Williams, we already talked about Double-A. Alfaro was playing in Double-A. With the time he's missed, and he's probably done for the year, he'll probably start back there. But that's fine. Roman Quinn was in Double-A before he got hurt. So you have a bunch of guys who are just about ready to start knocking on the door, and that's just in the top 7. That's not even talking about guys who, might help contribute later on, or to not be that sort of impact star level player. Zach Eflin is a guy. He's pretty good. He's pitching well in Double-A. He could fit into that rotation at some point in the next year. So there are a bunch of guys that are at the upper levels of the system. Even Nick Pivetta, who they got in the Papelbon trade, we haven't even talked about him. He's not going to blow anybody away, but he did just make it up to Double-A. Big 6'5" right-hander. You don't know. So they added, not only did they add a lot of depth, but they added guys who were at the Double-A level or higher. I think in the hopes that within the next year or 2, you're going to start seeing a big influx of young talent up to Philadelphia.
Yeah, and they brought up Franco. Is he exceeding expectations for you when you saw him play and followed him as a prospect? Is he exceeding what you envisioned for him as a big leaguer?
I never want to say exceeding expectations. I think that the fact that he's not swinging and missing that much is a very good sign. I knew the power would be there. I think probably right out of the gate, I would have thought that, I think the home runs and the run production, yeah, but I would have I were to have guessed or try to project numbers, which, it's kind of a fool's errand, but I would have maybe seen more strikeouts and slightly lower batting average. And without seeing him every day, he's also probably played a better third base than anybody could have expected. So, I think that when they brought him up, I thought that this will give him a very good foundation, regardless of how he performed going into next year, whether it's confidence boost, boy, I feel like I belong, or, okay, now I know what I need to work on beyond the, 56 at-bats he had in 2014. Either way, it was going to be a good foundation for next year, and I think he's gone beyond doing that just because of how well he's performed.
Jonathan Mayo, MLB.com, looks at the prospects, the MLB draft. What are you thinking of Nola? I know a lot of people look at him that he was ready but would not be a top-of-the-rotation guy, maybe like a 2 or maybe a 3. Is he a guy that his makeup might help him be a better pitcher than his stuff indicates?
Yeah, he always has outpitches his stuff. The command is just ridiculous, but he has stuff. This isn't a guy throwing 87 miles an hour, with very little margin for error. Now, he's not going to blow people away. He's not going to lead the National League in strikeouts. But, this is a guy who he throws in the low 90s with the fastball. He's got a plus changeup. His slider is at least major league average, and he can pretty much drop any of them on a dime. Listen, when he's on, he'll throw that low 90s fastball to both sides of the plate. He'll paint corners. He'll come up and down. He's got a little bit of a funky arm angle. It adds some life to his pitches and some deception. So I think he's one of those guys that because he's known as a command guy, people underestimate the stuff, and the stuff is pretty good. So I think he's one of those guys that, he profiles as a mid-rotation starter, but he's the kind of guy that will outperform his perceived ceiling and be a number 2. I don't put future ace on anybody, because you never know. I wouldn't even call Garrett Cole a future ace when he was coming up. So I don't like that term, but he's a guy who probably will pitch close to the top of a rotation with people throughout his career going, I don't know, I don't understand, but the stuff plus command is what really separates him.
Jonathan, do you think it's fair to look at the deal the Phillies made with the Tigers deal with Price? Did you think the Phillies did a better job than Detroit did?
So I think it's hard to compare only because of the amount of control over the player being traded. David Price is a rental, and Cole Hamels the Rangers will have. So that was a trade for now and for next year. So it would stand to reason that they would get more in return, and they did. I think the Tigers did fine in their trade. Daniel Norris has a chance to, I've said this a few times now, he could be David Price 3-4 years from now. He's that good. They got the top prospect, and then some other interesting parts. But the Blue Jays are only getting David Price for 2 months. So, that's going to limit the return, at least if you're trying to make a direct comparison.
Let me ask you, in the time you've been covering the game and prospects, how are organizations changing the way they view and want to get these guys up to the major leagues?
Well, I feel like it sort of comes in waves. And, I think there's always that undercurrent of teams, the certain teams that say, well, geez, if we don't have a good farm system, we can't compete. The quote-unquote the smaller market teams. I think the biggest change maybe in the last 4 or 5 years is that the larger market teams that may have lost sight of that have regained focus and understood that even in New York or Los Angeles or Chicago, you need to have a good farm system, whether it's to bring guys up to the big leagues or to have trading chips, but not so that you're trading everybody away and then you have nobody to help should the need arise. I look at the Yankees and their dynasty in the mid to late 90s into the turn of the century. It was completely built on the shoulders of homegrown players, and then they kind of lost sight of that, and now they're trying to build that back up. They wouldn't trade Luis Severino during this deadline period, and he's making his major league debut today. So I think more of a balance has been struck. So, yeah, there are still teams that are going to, have a win now every year at the big league level attitude. But they're really maybe having I don't want to say a better grasp, but a reformed grasp of how important it is to have a deeper farm system.
Good stuff with Jonathan Mayo. He says the biggest change is the larger markets have regained focus. The Phillies entered the year with a probably lower-rated farm system. Has that changed? In the last couple of months, have they done a good enough job to say, you know what, the Phillies now have a legitimate farm system, and then this is them regaining focus?
Yeah, I mean, how can it not? I mean, with the Hamels trade alone, you bring in 3 top 100 guys, your farm system is going to be that much better. They've got, I think, now, because the Cornelius Randolph was 99, they have 6 top 100 prospects. That's pretty good. But then there's some depth behind it with guys who aren't maybe top 100 caliber, some of whom have come in via trade, some of whom they've drafted the last couple of years, and some who have been around a while, who are still good. I think, to me, you want to have those guys at the top. They're good. But if you can look at, say, numbers 21 through 30 and see some players that might actually be good or have value, then you've made huge progress. Because, frankly, a few years ago, the Phillies were one of those teams where if you're trying to build out a top 30 list, it was challenging. You couldn't find talent. And now, because of some of these moves they've made, they're much deeper than they have been in years. So, yeah, I think, we don't do a 1 to 30 organizational rankings, but if they were close to the bottom, they definitely move into the upper half now, I think, with the trades that they've made.
Jonathan Mayo, MLB.com, covers all the prospects in the draft in the minor leagues, and really good stuff on the Phillies, who are very active, and we'll see. I know Utley could be a guy. Do you envision him having any sort of return and getting another guy they can add?
Well, they might add, some depth, but obviously, as great a player as Chase Utley has been in his career, the time to get value for a trade for him has probably passed by. That doesn't mean that there isn't a team in a playoff race that wouldn't like the veteran presence and bat off the bench and maybe catch lightning in a bottle, where a pennant race will rejuvenate him for a month or two. So I could see them making a deal. It won't be anything of great magnitude or bring in a top 100 type guy, but yeah, I think they might be able to bring in some more talent. And listen, even if it's not a guy who's on the top 30, you talk to any farm director, and if you can bring in more and more young talent, then it creates competition, and you never know where from that competition guys step up, and it pushes them. And when you have a guy who's 29th or 30th or not on the list, suddenly says, geez, I'm going to be out of a job, and things click as a result. So it's never a bad thing, even if the return is limited. Last
guy I want to ask you about, Jonathan, is Crawford. You touched on him a bit. Do you think he's 2016 or more likely 2017 ready?
I think he's going to push his way into their plans next year. I don't know when that's going to be. I'm a huge J.P. Crawford fan. I'm not really going out on a limb. But I think, given how he has performed, he has more walks and strikeouts in Double-A, and he's 20. I think I would probably send him to the fall league, maybe, unless he's just completely out of gas. But I don't think that'll be the case, and that could help him put the finishing touches. I'm not saying that I would open the job to him, in spring training, just because, he's played 57 games in Double-A. But I'd give him a nice long look at spring training, set a plan out for him, and make him force their hand. And I could see him starting the year in Triple-A, even if he goes back to Reading just to start, that he'll push his way up, kind of like Franco did, and you'll see him. I'll be conservative by the All-Star break.
All right, very cool to see Nola, Franco, and possibly J.P. Crawford by the All-Star break of next year. That would be a lot more excitement than the team that we see penciled in every single night out here, at least the one that started the season. Jonathan Mayo, MLB.com. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me.